This is the critical moment. You've been denied. That letter hits your mailbox, and instantly the air goes out of the room. It's a gut punch, a rejection not just of paperwork, but of your service and your sacrifice. The VA system is designed to be confusing, built on a foundation of acronyms and legal precedents that make it feel like you're battling a ghost bureaucracy. They know that most veterans, after that first denial, will simply give up. They count on it. But what if I told you that the denial letter itself is the VA's biggest weakness? What if the denial isn't the end of the road, but a detailed map showing you exactly where they failed, and more importantly, where you can strategically exploit their procedural mistakes? This isn't about arguing symptoms. This is about mastering the appeal process, the hidden strategies the VA hopes you never learn. We're going deep into the EIE Appeal Playbook, the tactical maneuvers that turn a denial into an inevitable win, forcing the system to recognize your claim. The very first, most crucial step in any successful appeal strategy is moving past the emotional reaction to the denial and treating that letter like a battlefield intelligence report. Most veterans make the catastrophic mistake of focusing only on the rating decision, the percentage, or the simple, not service-connected finding. That's the symptom, not the disease. The VA doesn't want you to see that every denial must be legally justified by a specific failure in one of the 4 pillars of a successful claim. If you don't identify which pillar collapsed, you'll waste months, sometimes years, fighting the wrong battle. This foundational flaw is where we start. The foundational flaw: decoding the denial's weakness. A VA claim stands on 4 legs. 1. A current diagnosis of a disability. 2. An in-service event, injury, or exposure. 3. A medical nexus, link, connecting the diagnosis to the service event. And 4. Competent evidence supporting all 3. When the VA denies you, they are legally required to state exactly which leg failed. This is codified in the regulations, specifically in the requirement for adequate notification and statement of reasons. The VA often obscures this by using generic language, but if you read carefully, the specific legal flaw is always there. For instance, a denial might state, "While we acknowledge your diagnosis of chronic back pain, the evidence does not show a link to your 1995 training injury." This is a nexus failure. Your diagnosis is fine, your service event is documented, but the medical link is missing or too weak. The correct appeal strategy here is not to submit more buddy statements about how much your back hurts, which only bolsters the diagnosis pillar, which is already stable. The correct strategy is to aggressively seek a robust, private medical opinion, a nexus letter that specifically addresses the gap. Contrast that with a denial that says, "While the records show an in-service injury to your knee, the current medical evidence does not support a diagnosis of a chronic disability." This is a B. Diagnosis failure. The VA is saying you healed, or your current symptoms don't meet the diagnostic criteria for a compensable condition. Here, the appeal strategy shifts entirely. You need a new, comprehensive medical evaluation, possibly from a specialist, that confirms the chronic nature of the condition and provides objective findings, MRIs, X-rays, range of motion tests, that the VA examiner overlooked or dismissed. Understanding this distinction is the difference between a quick win and 5 years of appeals. If you submit new evidence that addresses a pillar the VA already accepted, you are merely confirming information they already possess, wasting time and failing to provide the new and relevant evidence necessary to overturn the decision. The VA hopes you throw everything at the wall, obscuring the single surgical piece of evidence required for victory. They want you to argue symptoms. We are going to argue legal insufficiency. The sheer volume of claims processed means the VA often relies on boilerplate denial language. Your job is to meticulously cross-reference the denial letter with the specific laws, Title 38 of the U.S. Code and 38 CFR, that govern those 4 pillars. For example, if the VA denies service connection for PTSD because they claim there is no stressor verification, you need to immediately look at 38 CFR paragraph 3.304F. This regulation outlines various ways a stressor can be substantiated, including combat service, fear of hostile military or terrorist activity, or even credible lay evidence in certain circumstances. The VA may have simply used the easiest, most generic denial route, ignoring alternative verification methods. By citing the specific regulation they failed to follow, you immediately elevate your appeal from a complaint to a legal challenge. This is the level of detail the VA doesn't want you to engage in, the strategic, surgical dismantling of their denial rationale. The HLR versus supplemental claim. Trap, choosing your weapon wisely. Once you've identified the foundational flaw, you face the next critical decision: which appeal lane to take. The VA offers 3 main paths for post-denial review: the supplemental claim, the higher-level review, HLR, and the Board of Veterans Appeals, BVA. The most common trap is choosing the wrong one, which can delay your effective date or prevent you from introducing the necessary evidence. The VA loves ambiguity here. The higher-level review, HLR, is a tactical nuclear option, but it must be used precisely. The HLR is a review of the existing evidence by a senior claims adjudicator. Crucially, no new evidence is allowed. The HLR adjudicator is looking for an error of law or a clear and unmistakable error, CUE, in the original decision. If the original denial failed to properly apply a regulation, overlooked a piece of evidence already in the file, or misinterpreted a medical opinion, the HLR is the fastest way to get it corrected. When do you use the HLR? You use it when the denial letter confirms that the VA had all the necessary evidence but simply drew the wrong conclusion. For example, if your file contained a detailed nexus letter stating your condition was, more likely than not, related to service, but the rater ignored it and denied the claim, that's an HLR situation. You are arguing that the previous decision-maker committed an error by failing to properly weigh the evidence. The VA doesn't want you to choose the HLR strategically because if you win, the effective date is preserved immediately and the decision can be overturned quickly without years of development time. The PIDA supplemental claim. Conversely, is the path you take when you realize the denial was correct based on the evidence they had, but that evidence was insufficient. This path requires new and relevant evidence to overcome the flaw identified in the denial. If the denial stated lack of nexus, the supplemental claim is where you submit the brand new, robust nexus letter. If the denial stated insufficient diagnosis, the supplemental claim is where you submit the new specialist report. The key here is the standard. The evidence must be both new, not previously submitted, and relevant, tending to prove or disprove a matter at issue. The trap is using a supplemental claim when an HLR was appropriate. If you submit a supplemental claim but only provide evidence that was already in your file, the VA will likely deny it again, stating the evidence isn't new and you've wasted valuable time. Conversely, if you choose the HLR when the denial clearly stated you lacked a key piece of evidence, like a nexus letter, the HLR reviewer will simply confirm the original denial because they cannot consider the missing piece. The VA benefits from you mixing these up. They hope you choose the supplemental claim and submit a pile of irrelevant documents, forcing them to spend months reviewing paperwork that doesn't fix the foundational flaw. A true strategic veteran uses the HLR first if there is any plausible error of law or fact based on existing records. If the HLR fails, Then you pivot to the supplemental claim, armed with the specific targeted evidence needed to overcome the denial rationale confirmed by the HLR review. This two-pronged approach maintains the earliest possible effective date while systematically eliminating the VA's reasons for denial. Consider a scenario. The VA denies your claim for migraines secondary to tinnitus. You review the denial and realize the C&P examiner failed to review your 6 years of civilian medical records detailing the severity and frequency of the migraines. You choose the HLR. During the optional informal conference, you point out to the senior reviewer that 38 CFR paragraph 3.321 requires consideration of all relevant evidence, and the C&P summary explicitly states civilian records were not available for review, despite them being uploaded months prior. This is a clear error of fact and law. The HLR reviewer, seeing this procedural error, overturns the decision and orders a new C&P exam or grants the claim. This strategic use of the HLR avoids the long development cycle of a supplemental claim. However, if the denial stated the relationship between tinnitus and migraines is not medically established in this case, and you had no nexus letter, the HLR would fail. You would then pivot to a supplemental claim, submitting a nexus letter from a neurologist specifically linking the two conditions, citing medical literature. This is the targeted approach the VA dreads. Chaktanon Pinora. The duty to assist gambit, turning VA inaction into appeal leverage. One of the most powerful yet underutilized tools in the PUD veterans' arsenal is 38 U.S.C. paragraph 5103A, known as the duty to assist. This law mandates that the VA must help the veteran obtain relevant evidence necessary to substantiate a claim. This is not a suggestion, it is a legal requirement. When the VA denies a claim, they often do so because they couldn't obtain necessary records, usually service treatment records, STRs, from a complex archive, or private medical records, PMRs, where the doctor's office was slow to respond. The VA hopes you accept this failure as final. We turn this failure into a powerful appeal lever. The VA's duty to assist includes 1. Obtaining federal records, like STRs, VA medical records. 2. Obtaining private medical records if the veteran provides the necessary authorization. And 3. Providing a medical examination, the C&P exam, when necessary to decide the claim. The crucial strategy here is to document every instance where the VA failed to meet this duty and then use that failure as the basis for an appeal, often via the higher-level review. If the denial states, "We were unable to obtain records from Dr. Smith's office," the VA has technically fulfilled part of its duty by trying. However, the law requires more than a single attempt. A sophisticated appeal will demand proof of multiple attempts and documentation of specific follow-up actions. If the VA simply sent one form letter and gave up, they have violated their duty. To execute the duty to assist gambit, you must be meticulous. When you submit your initial claim, you provide the name, address, and dates of treatment for all relevant civilian providers. If the VA fails to obtain those records, you immediately file an HLR citing 38 U.S.C. paragraph 5103A and arguing that the VA committed a clear error of law by failing to fully develop the evidence. You don't submit the records yourself yet. You force the VA to acknowledge their procedural failure. For example, imagine you were treated at a military base hospital in 1985 and the VA claims those STRs are unavailable. Instead of accepting this, you file an HLR and specifically request an informal conference. In that conference, you state, "The VA has a statutory duty to assist. I provided the specific location and dates of treatment. Before you proceed, I need to see the official documentation detailing the steps taken to search the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, for these records and the dates of those searches." If the search was not exhaustive, the denial is premature and violates 38 U.S. Mass. Shahi, Paragraph 5103A. This immediately shifts the burden back to the VA. They are now forced to prove they complied with the law, rather than you having to prove your claim. This is a crucial procedural strategy that often results in the HLR reviewer remanding the case for further development, effectively overturning the denial based on process failure. The VA doesn't want you to know the power of the remand. When a case is remanded, it means the VA has admitted a mistake in the process and must go back and fix it. This preserves your effective date and forces the VA to expend resources developing the evidence they should have obtained in the first place. This strategy is particularly effective for older claims where records are notoriously hard to find. By holding the VA accountable for their statutory duty, you ensure that the denial is based on a true lack of evidence, not merely bureaucratic laziness or procedural shortcutting. The Nexus Letter Power Play beyond the doctor's note. The Nexus Letter is the single most important piece of evidence in most claims, yet 90% of veterans submit weak, ineffective letters that are easily dismissed by VA adjudicators. The VA relies on the fact that most civilian doctors are unfamiliar with the specific legal language required by Title 38. They hope you submit a letter that uses vague, non-committal language. The power play here is ensuring your Nexus letter is legally sound, not just medically plausible. It must explicitly address the legal standard of proof required for service connection. That standard is at least as likely as not. This precise phrase, or stronger phrases like more likely than not, must be present. If your doctor writes, the condition may be related to service, or it is possible that service contributed, that letter is worthless in the VA system. It fails to meet the legal threshold. A strategic Nexus letter must contain 3 critical elements that the VA looks for and often fails to find. 1. Review of specific evidence. The letter must explicitly list the evidence the doctor reviewed, including STRs, C-file documents, the denial letter, and any relevant C&P exams. A generic statement like, "I reviewed the patient's history," is insufficient. The doctor must state, "I reviewed the service treatment records dated 1998, the C&P exam summary dated June 12, 2022, and the denial letter dated August 1, 2022. This shows the opinion is informed by the complete context of the VA claim, not just a brief physical exam. 2. Medical rationale and citations. This is the most frequently missed element. A VA rater is trained to dismiss opinions that lack sufficient medical rationale. Your doctor must explain how the service event caused the current disability, citing recognized medical literature, peer-reviewed journals, or established medical principles. For example, if linking Agent Orange exposure to a presumptive condition, the doctor should cite the specific VA regulation or the Institute of Medicine report that establishes the link. If linking a secondary condition, e.g., depression secondary to chronic pain, the doctor must cite psychiatric literature establishing the causal pathway. The stronger the citation, the harder it is for a VA examiner to successfully refute the opinion. 3. The magic phrase. The conclusion must use the precise legal language. In my professional opinion, based on the review of the evidence and sound medical principles, the veteran's condition X is being at least as likely as not, or it more likely than not, caused by or approximately due to the in-service event, service event Y. The VA often attempts to counter a private Nexus letter with a VA medical opinion, VAMO, from one of their contract examiners. The VA hopes your private opinion is weak enough that their VAMO, which often relies on generic or negative findings, will prevail. The power play is to anticipate the VAMO. Your Nexus letter should preemptively address and rebut common VA denial rationales. For instance, if the VA previously denied the claim arguing that the condition manifested outside the presumptive period, Your doctor should specifically address why the current condition is a delayed manifestation of the service injury, citing medical literature on latency periods or chronic progression. This forces the VA examiner to specifically refute your doctor's rationale, rather than simply issuing a generic negative finding. When the VA examiner fails to address the specific, detailed rationale provided by your private doctor, that failure becomes a clear error of law, ripe for an HLR or BVA appeal. This proactive, legally informed approach to the Nexus letter transforms it from a simple supporting document into a strategic counter-argument. We must also discuss the strategy of secondary service connection, which is often misunderstood. A secondary claim argues that a service-connected disability caused or aggravated a new non-service-connected condition. For example, severe knee arthritis, service-connected, causes a change in gait, leading to chronic hip and back pain, secondary claim. The VA often denies these because the Nexus letter is too generic. The strategic Nexus letter for a secondary claim must specifically detail the biomechanical or pharmacological link. The doctor must explain, due to the chronic instability of the service-connected left knee, the patient developed compensatory gait mechanics, placing undue stress on the right hip joint, leading directly to the onset of osteoarthritis in the right hip. This is a direct causal relationship. This level of detail is the difference between denial and approval, and it's the specificity the VA rarely sees, which makes it highly effective. The C&P exam counteroffensive, challenging the examiner's findings. The compensation and pension C&P exam is often the single greatest obstacle to approval. The VA examiner acts as the VA's fact finder, and their opinion carries immense weight. When a denial is based primarily on a negative C&P finding, the VA assumes you will accept the medical opinion as final. This is where the counteroffensive begins. You are legally allowed to challenge the sufficiency and objectivity of the C&P examiner's report. The first step in this counteroffensive is obtaining a copy of the C&P exam report. You cannot effectively appeal what you haven't read. Once you have the report, you meticulously search for 3 types of errors. 1. Factual errors, inaccuracies. Did the examiner misstate your military service dates? Did they incorrectly record your symptoms, claiming you reported pain as 310 when you reported 810? Did they claim you reported no functional limitations when you described significant limitations? These are easy to spot and form the basis for a rapid HLR appeal. 2. Procedural failures. Did the examiner fail to review all relevant records? The report must list the documents reviewed. If they missed your critical civilian MRI or your detailed lay statement, they failed their duty, and the opinion is insufficient. This is a classic violation of the duty to assist and grounds for a remand. 3. Medical insufficiency, the legal challenge. This is the advanced move. Under 38 CFR paragraph 3.321 BB2, a VA medical opinion is only adequate if it is based on sound medical principles and supported by the evidence. If the examiner's negative opinion is conclusory, meaning they state a conclusion, not related to service, without providing a detailed, reasoned rationale, the opinion is legally insufficient. You appeal this by arguing the opinion lacks probative value. The ultimate counteroffensive is submitting a rebuttal statement, or a rebuttal medical opinion. A rebuttal statement is your detailed point-by-point refutation of the C&P report. If the examiner stated you could lift 50 pounds, but your civilian doctor has restricted you to 10 pounds, you submit your doctor's note and a detailed statement explaining the discrepancy, perhaps noting the examiner only observed you for 5 minutes. The most potent weapon is the rebuttal medical opinion, often provided by the same doctor who wrote your Nexus letter. This private doctor reviews the C&P report and specifically states why the VA examiner's opinion is flawed, medically unsound, or based on incomplete data. For example, the VA examiner concluded the veteran's condition was degenerative and not service-related. However, this opinion fails to account for the specific trauma documented in the STRs, which is a known trigger for accelerated degeneration, as documented in the Journal of Orthopedic Medicine, 2019 WARN. This direct confrontation of the VA's expert opinion with a superior evidence-based opinion is devastating to the VA's denial rationale. The VA doesn't want you to know that their examiners are often general practitioners working under high volume, and their opinions are frequently vulnerable to focused, expert challenge. By systematically dismantling the C&P report, you not only negate the denial but also set the stage for a new, more favorable examination, or better yet, a direct grant based on the weight of your superior evidence. This is not arguing symptoms. This is arguing medical jurisprudence. Manda? The importance of lay evidence, turning testimony into medical fact. Many veterans mistakenly believe that only medical records count. The VA, however, is legally required to consider lay evidence, testimony from the veteran, family members, or fellow service members, buddy statements, as competent evidence, especially when medical records are unavailable or incomplete. This is particularly true for conditions that are difficult to document medically, such as chronic pain, mental health symptoms, or the onset of conditions years after service. The VA hopes you submit vague emotional statements that are easily dismissed as subjective. The strategy here is to transform anecdotal testimony into high-value medical evidence by focusing on objective detail and the legal requirements established by precedent. The courts, specifically the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, CAVC, have established that a layperson is competent to testify about 1. What they observed, symptoms, limitations, and 2. The connection between an injury and the onset of symptoms, particularly when the injury occurred during service and medical expertise, is not required to observe the link. To execute this, your lay statements must adhere to the following principles. 1. Specificity of time, place, and event. Vague statements like, "I hurt my back in the military," are useless. Effective lay evidence states, on or about July 14, 1997, during field training exercise Iron Fist at Fort Bragg, I was carrying a mortar-base plate when I felt a sharp immediate pain in my lower back. I immediately reported to the medic, Smith, at the aid station near grid coordinate 45B. This links the current condition directly to a verifiable service event. 2. Detailed functional limitations. For chronic conditions, lay statements must detail the impact on daily life and the severity of the symptoms. Instead of, "I have bad pain," the statement should read, "Due to the pain, I cannot stand for more than 15 minutes without shifting weight and needing to sit. I am unable to lift my 2-year-old child and require my spouse to assist me with grocery bags." This limitation began immediately after my discharge in 2003 and has worsened over the last 5 years. This provides the rater with the necessary data points to assign a functional rating. 3. Buddy statements as corroboration. Buddy statements are invaluable, especially for stressor verification in PTSD claims or documenting injuries that occurred in the field without immediate medical attention. The buddy statement must be treated like a legal deposition. It must include the buddy's full name, contact information, their relationship to the veteran, and a detailed first-hand account of the event or the observation of the veteran's symptoms, during service. The statement should conclude with a certification that the information is true and accurate to the best of their knowledge. For mental health claims, lay evidence is often the difference maker. If a veteran was denied PTSD because the VA claimed the symptoms were not severe enough, detailed statements from a spouse or family member describing the veteran's increased isolation, nightmares, anger outbursts, and inability to maintain employment with specific dates and examples can often overturn the denial, even without extensive contemporary medical documentation. The VA is forced to weigh this consistent, detailed testimony against the often brief observation of a C&P examiner. The VA hopes you overlook the legal weight of this evidence. By making your lay statement specific, detailed, and directly tied to the 4 pillars of the claim, especially the service event and the current functional impact, you force the VA to acknowledge subjective experience as objective fact. This strategic use of testimony is a powerful tool to overcome denials based on lack of records or insufficient severity. Chambre Foisse, the Board of Appeals strategy, escalating to the BVA. If the HLR and supplemental claim routes fail, the final strategic escalation is the Board of Veterans' Appeals, BVA. This is the highest level of administrative review, where your claim is reviewed by veterans law judges, VLJs. The VA doesn't want you to appeal to the BVA because it requires significant time and judicial resources, and it removes the claim from the regional office's control. Crucially, the BVA offers 3 distinct appeal dockets, and choosing the wrong one is a common strategic error. The 3 BVA dockets are 1-to-1, direct review. This is the fastest option, but like the HLR, no new evidence is allowed. You are arguing that the regional office, RO, made a mistake based on the evidence they already had. Use this only when you are certain the record is complete and the VLJ simply needs to correct an error of law or fact. This is ideal if the RO ignored a favorable nexus letter or misapplied a rating criterion. 2. Evidence submission. This option allows you to submit new and relevant evidence within 90 days of the appeal filing. This is the most common choice and is appropriate when you have obtained that final surgical piece of evidence, like a superior rebuttal nexus letter or a detailed specialist report, that you are confident will overcome the denial. 3. Hearing. This is the most powerful and strategic option, though it has the longest wait time. The hearing docket allows you to appear before a veterans law judge, VLJ, either virtually or in person, and present testimony. You can also submit new evidence up to 90 days after the hearing. The strategic choice often leans toward the hearing docket. Why? Because it offers the veteran the opportunity to personally address the VLJ and provide live testimony that may overcome decades of negative paperwork. For claims involving complex trauma, mental health, or subjective pain, the human element of the hearing can be invaluable. The VLJ sees the veteran, hears their story, and observes the functional limitations firsthand. This personal testimony, especially when backed by a skilled advocate, can often sway a judge who might otherwise rely solely on a cold review of the paper file. The VA hopes you choose the direct review, allowing them to maintain the bureaucratic distance. Choosing the hearing docket forces accountability and humanizes the claim. Furthermore, the BVA is where we leverage the concept of precedential decisions. When preparing a BVA appeal, you must identify specific, favorable decisions from the CAVC or the BVA that support your claim, even if the facts are slightly different. For example, if you are appealing a denial of service connection for a condition based on environmental exposure, you should cite other BVA decisions that have granted similar claims based on comparable circumstances. This demonstrates to the VLJ that there is a legal precedent for granting your claim, forcing them to either follow that precedent or provide a detailed reasoned justification for why your case is different. This is a level of legal preparation that is often only seen when claims are represented by accredited attorneys or agents, and it's the level of strategic depth the VA does not want you to employ on your own. The final crucial BVA strategy is understanding the remand. Unlike the RO, the BVA has the power to issue a decision granting benefits, denying benefits, or remanding the claim back to the RO. A remand occurs when the VLJ determines the RO failed to fulfill the duty to assist or committed a procedural error. A strategic veteran often presents evidence or arguments specifically designed to trigger a remand, forcing the RO to redevelop the claim correctly, thus preserving the effective date and giving the veteran another bite at the apple with a clean slate. This is often a better outcome than a straight denial, as it guarantees the VA must spend time and resources fixing their own mistake. The BVA is the arena where procedural errors are most effectively leveraged into positive outcomes. Conclusion: the strategic shift from veteran to advocate. The VA denial letter is not a definitive statement. It is merely an administrative hurdle. The secret strategy the VA does not want you to master is the shift in perspective. Stop viewing yourself as a passive recipient of a government decision and start viewing yourself as an active, informed legal advocate capable of systematically dismantling their denial rationale. We have walked through the 7 critical steps to turn a denial into an appeal victory. It begins with the surgical precision required to identify the foundational flaw, the exact legal or evidentiary pillar that collapsed. It continues with the tactical choice between the HLR and the supplemental claim, ensuring you're fighting the right battle with the right tools. We then weaponize the VA's own procedures through the duty to assist gambit, forcing them to fulfill their statutory obligations. The Nexus letter power play ensures your medical evidence speaks the specific, legally required language of at least as likely as not. We then mount the C&P counteroffensive, challenging the examiner's conclusions with superior evidence and legal precedent. Finally, we elevate lay evidence from simple anecdote to competent medical fact and use the BVA strategy to force judicial review and accountability. Every successful appeal is a testament to preparation and knowledge. The VA system is complex, but it is bound by law. When you appeal, you're not asking for a favor. You're demanding compliance with Title 38. Take that denial letter, decode its weakness, arm yourself with surgical evidence, and force the system to honor your service. The system is designed to wear you down. Your strategy is designed to win. Do not settle, do not give up, and do not let them count on your silence. Your fight is valid, and victory is achievable.